Hello, and welcome to Heart Containers, a daily Nintendo podcast where every Monday through Friday we go through the latest Nintendo news. I'm your host, Rami Fawaz, and today is the episode for Monday, March 18th. I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend. I had this plan to play a whole bunch of games this weekend, Nintendo games. I wanted to dive into Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker. The new DLC has released, but my partner in crime, my wife, who was supposed to play all the co-op games with me, well, she had a different schedule in mind, so I didn't get to play any Toad Treasure Tracker, but there was a different game, the surprise hit of the week, Bubba Is You. I downloaded it off the eShop. It's just $15, and boy, do I love this game. I've been playing it with my wife also, separately though, because we couldn't do the co-op, so we couldn't play this game together either very much, but she's also absolutely in love with it. In fact, she's played hours and hours of it more than I have. I just got to see maybe 20 minutes of the game where I got to look into it and feel like I was playing it, and I'm already in love with it. And basically, if you don't know anything about this game, it's a game where the rules of the world are literally written on the screen. So it'll say, Bubba is you, and what that means is that the character Bubba, who's like a bunny rabbit, well, you get to control him. You maneuver him around, and you can push the things around you in the world to maneuver them in whatever way you see fit. But the cool twist to this game is that the rules themselves are malleable. So you can change Bubba is you to be Rock is you, and all of a sudden you are playing as a rock. And it's all about changing the rules physically, literally, on the screen so that the rules and the physics of the world change so that you can get to the end of the puzzle or the end of the level. It's very clever, very mind-bending. It makes you feel so good when you figure it out. And it's one of my hits of this year on the Nintendo Switch. Again, $15, absolutely a no-brainer. I can't wait to go play that game. Even more came out last week for the Nintendo Switch, but we have a job to do today, guys. We're going to talk about the Nintendo news that we learned over this past weekend. There's a couple of really good things to talk about. First of all, the potential end of publicly available video game sales data from Japan. That's a sad moment for us, but we've traditionally gotten a lot of information from Japan about how well video games and consoles are selling over there in that region, and that might stop very, very soon. We're also going to talk about Octopath Traveler, Champions of the Continent. Boy, that's a bit of a mouthful, but that game is actually the mobile spinoff for Octopath Traveler, the Switch exclusive that came out last year. Reggie Fils-Aimé, the current president in Nintendo of America, soon to be the retired president, how he is a complete boss. So we're going to get into that story. And lastly, we're going to talk about a rumored ground-shattering Switch game, which is set to be as unexpected as if Mario appeared on a PlayStation device. So that's a really, really bold statement. So we're going to get into that and a whole lot more in today's Daily Nintendo Report.
Well, the wait is over. This is Nintendo DS. My body is ready.
We would like to play.
A way to make 3D games a reality, and it's called the Wii U Game Pen.
Media Create, the Japanese entertainment analysis company who is responsible for the majority of Japan's video game sales data reports, will no longer be disclosing exact sales numbers to the public. I'm going to caveat this real quick by saying we've talked about Media Create sales data over and over again, so this is going to directly impact our conversations on this show. The company is known for publishing weekly rundowns of the top-selling hardware and software in Japan. But starting in April, they're about to get a whole lot less specific with their information. So what you usually see from Media Create is a ranking of something like the top 50 games sold in that previous week, as well as the exact numbers. It'll say something like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has sold 23,000 copies this week, and here's the total that it's sold. So it can be really helpful depending on the type of discussions that you want to have. They also talk about hardware. They say the Switch sold 80,000 this week and the PS4 sold 40,000 this week, stuff like that. You're no longer going to be getting that from Media Create starting in April. What you'll get instead is a ranking of the top 10 games that have sold that week. So I'll say Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is number one with no information following that. Like, how is it number one? How big is the margin between number one and number two. Those type of discussions, those type of informational bits that are really good to get into and dive into that nitty gritty, we won't get that anymore. As well as they're just going to axe the hardware stuff entirely, because it doesn't make sense to rank the hardware. You can't say, oh, well, the Switch is number one this week and the PS4 is number two. It makes a whole lot less sense than the software side of things. So you're just not even going to get hardware information on a weekly basis. And I don't feel like I have to explain to you guys how much of a loss that is. It sucks not to have these extra data points, to have more conversations, especially when it comes to smaller games that don't necessarily get the same amount of attention as the big marquee titles. Games like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, like I've been mentioning as an example, that's not really in any danger because those games sell so well. They sell millions and millions of copies that Nintendo loves to gloat about it anyway. And they're going to appear on multiple charts across the world, so that we don't really need to be looking at Japan specifically to know how well they're doing. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe will show up in the NPD sales data, for instance, in the US, so that we get an idea of that. And also, like I said before, Nintendo is going to openly talk about how well Mario Kart 8 is selling. It's the games that are much smaller in scope, they don't sell necessarily well, that we're losing information about. We just talked about Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn, I believe, last week, about the early sales data, the early reports that we're getting from Japan, from Media Create, and how it's starting off on the wrong foot, that it's not selling a lot of the shipment I think it's all like 20% of the original shipment originally, and how that's not very great, but it's also matching how well Mario and Luigi sold when it released in January for the 3DS. And all of those conversations come from Media Create, because Media Create is telling us on a week-to-week basis the most important games that are being sold, and that means because of how often they're talking to us and how accurate those numbers are, we are getting information about all sorts of games, big or small, and we're able to have those conversations. But in NPD, you're not going to see a game like Mario and Luigi for sure, but Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn was the point I was trying to make. We're not going to learn more about Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn on NPD sales data. It's not going to be one of the best selling games for the month, and since we will not hear more about those games from Media Create, we're in the dark here, guys. We don't have the information that we need to really talk about it, and that sucks overall. Nintendo isn't going to tell us about small games that don't sell very well as a whole. I mean, if you go back and look at generations past, look at franchises like F-Zero, which has never sold that well traditionally. Well, if you want to go find the informational data about how well each game in the F-Zero series has sold, you just can't. You can't. I mean, the majority of those games don't have concrete information, and that's because if you are smaller in scope or you don't sell millions and millions of copies, no one wants to report on you. And Media Create was an example of getting more information and using that information as a barometer. You know, Japan, that region of video games, isn't necessarily one-to-one with a region like the US or the UK or Europe or anything like that, but you could kind of use it as a barometer, in my opinion, to say, hey, Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn is selling this well in Japan, so that kind of tells us how people feel about the 3DS overall. At least that's how I've used Media Create data in the past, and now we won't have that option coming in April. Square Enix has revealed a bit more information for the upcoming Octopath Traveler mobile spin-off, Champions of the Continent. Now, Octopath Traveler being the JRPG that was exclusive to the Nintendo Switch and released, I believe, in the summer of last year, and Champions of the Continent is the spin-off sort of title that they talked about last week when they said, hey, we're going to do more Octo Traveler content, more Octo Traveler games, and everyone was hoping for an Octopath Traveler, man, that's a name, right? Octopath Traveler sequel for the Nintendo Switch. They did not get that. They got a mobile announcement, or we got a mobile announcement instead, but they did say that there is a sequel coming at some point. They're just not ready to talk about it. Now they're talking about the mobile game. In an interview with the Japanese publication Famitsu, producers for the project mentioned a few key things that are sure to excite fans of the original title for the Nintendo Switch. And first of all, the game will play almost exactly like the Switch version. There have been similar mobile and Nintendo console experiments like this in the past with the Bravely Default series, but in those cases, the DS and mobile variations had fairly different play styles. Now, this time around, the team kind of challenged themselves to maintain the same Octopath Traveler gameplay amongst both version. So if you were a really big fan of the game on the Nintendo Switch last year, you might want to consider the mobile game, which will play almost identically besides a few tweaks. And speaking of those tweaks, they are going to make some adjustments so that it better fits the mobile experience. For example, one of these is going to be a more streamlined approach to the game's movement. Instead of forcing you to kind of do a touchscreen analog stick like you had the luxury of for the Nintendo Switch, they're going to have a new flicking system, which just makes it easier to move around. So that just means that they're going to adapt it more readily onto iOS and Android. That's a cool thing for me to see because I play games very differently when it comes to mobile and handheld or home console. Those are different experiences. I invest different time periods. I'm in a different mindset when I play a mobile game. So I want my mobile games to adapt to that. It's really cool to see Octopath Traveler be transitioned onto mobile and sort of like keep its identity, but there are things that need to change for me to kind of want to stick with that. I don't just want to play an Octopath Traveler experience, one for one, but on mobile, because I could just go play Octopath Traveler again on the Nintendo Switch. So I like that they are trying to challenge themselves in this regard and make something that fits and feels like it's native for the mobile platform, but is still a tried and true Octopath Traveler experience. Now, as for the mobile game side of it, they do plan to prolong the experience over a substantial period of time, like many other mobile games do, but they are doing it in a way that I'm personally more interested in. They're adding monthly single player content to continue to expand upon the main campaign overall. So instead of having, gacha mechanics or anything that involves a lot of risk or gambling, any of that type of thing that keeps you hooked for a long period of time, multiplayer events, stuff like that, they're just going to go with this DLC style approach where you have a single player story and they expand upon it in the long run. I think that's perfect for a game like Octopath Traveler, where it's all about telling 8 stories for 8 different protagonists. If they can kind of break that up and slowly tell that story over time, bring me back in, maybe something like the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, where every story kind of has its own unique ups and downs and hero's journey, but then they all connect to tell one grand story, and that's why you're compelled to come back for more. So maybe this is the genesis of the Octopath Traveler cinematic universe, and I'm into it. Reggie Fils-Aimé is a class act. On Friday, a Reddit user posted a letter he got from the soon-to-be retired president of Nintendo of America, Reggie Fils-Aimé, congratulating him for achieving the Eagle Scout ranking in the Boy Scouts. A side note, I know nothing about the Boy Scouts. I know nothing about Eagle Scout rankings or what rankings they have. I was never a Boy Scout. It sounded cool, it looked cool, but it was just never an option for me, I guess. I was never talked to about it. I'm only prefacing that because although I am reading about this story, I don't know how, is it difficult to be an Eagle Scout? It must be. I'm going to continue to go on with the story. I wanted to just read a few sentences from the letter just so you guys can get a good idea of what he said, because I can't explain to you guys exactly how significant Eagle Scout is, but it seems like from what Reggie's saying that this is a big deal. It is my esteemed privilege to congratulate you for your success in achieving Eagle Scout. We are honored that we were contacted to acknowledge this important moment in your life. We know that becoming an Eagle Scout is an honor that only about 2% of all Boy Scouts achieve. You can now be counted among the most dedicated and talented young men of America to achieve this show's extraordinary character and commitment. End quote. I guess this means I am not personally counted among the most dedicated and talented young men of America, but I digress. The letter goes on as well to congratulate the Redditor even more. There's a lot more to it, but I didn't want to go into all of it. If you want to read it yourself, feel free to. It's on the interwebs. It's not that hard to find. Even mentioning at one point that there are high-ranking Nintendo colleagues who also achieved this Eagle Scout status, so that you're trying to make that guy feel good about himself. It's like, yeah, man, you did a good thing. You worked really hard for it. And not only that, but you seem to be part of this Nintendo community, and there are other people who are part of this Nintendo community who are just like you. So high five. And I know that this does not bear any meaningful news update that could impact your Nintendo life in one way or another, but I just wanted to share a touching moment by a company, and more specifically a person who really seems to care about their community for the most part. We hear all the time that companies are not your friends, that they're big corporations, and they want nothing more than to make money. And I'm not saying Nintendo is an exception to that. Of course, Nintendo wants to make money, but it is a good reminder that every now and then companies are made of people, and people have their own personal agendas, and sometimes they do want to build a community and put the consumer ahead of the final, the bottom line profit. And I felt like this was a really good example of that, with Reggie unfortunately retiring soon, but showing that he is looking out for us, and he's going to take the time to write a really heartfelt letter, or at least sign it. I hope that he wrote it, but a really kind letter to this, I guess, young man about achieving Eagle Scout data. And it goes to say that Nintendo kind of fosters a different type of, environment, culture for their employees. This ties in really nicely to that story that we were talking about last week or the week before, where Dragalia lost one of their mobile games. They actually toned down the amount of gambling that you could do in that game, or at least the rates that made it a little bit more challenging to gamble, to do the gotcha mechanics that, like, they could have been making more money for that game, and they toned it down purposely because they didn't want to tarnish their brand. They still wanted to be seen as a family friendly, putting the consumer first to an extent. They want to make money, but they didn't want to make that much money. And it just goes to show that sometimes Nintendo really is looking out for you. Sometimes companies are, again, made of people, and people do care, and Reggie Fils-Aimé definitely cares. Okay, let's finish off the report, which is probably the most exciting thing to come out of this past weekend. King Zell is back with more Nintendo Switch rumors, and possibly the most exciting one I've heard from him yet. And if you don't know who King Zell is, he's probably my most respected Nintendo leaker. There are, I would say, like, if there was a ranking of Nintendo leakers that I've seen throughout these past years, and ever since I started the podcast, which I have to look at every single piece of Nintendo news that crosses the interwebs. Trust me, I've definitely seen every rumor or leak in the past, at least the past few months, in anticipation of trying to find the correct or the most interesting headlines to share with you on this show. And the vast majority of these people that leak things or spill rumors are almost always wrong. They don't have a lot of credibility. King Zell is probably the top of my list in terms of how trustworthy he is. In 2019 alone, he was responsible for revealing the date of the February Direct. He also talked about a few of the games that were going to be talked about during that Direct. The Pokemon Direct date, he was there for that, and a handful of third-party teases. He's been there. He's really been on point in 2019 so far. And the moment he slips up, the moment he makes a mistake, I'm going to tell you about it. Don't worry about it. But for now, he's been very credible. So I'm going to take what he's saying as being pretty credible, right? And we're going to talk about it right now. The word of Zell was spoken once again during a part of this weekend where he posted the following on the Reset Era forum. Some stuff coming to Switch, at least one. I mean, it wasn't even possible years ago. Can't wait to see the reaction here. As you might expect, that stirred up a lot of conversation. What do you mean by that, King Zell? Well, when asked to clarify what he meant by saying not possible, he did clarify. And he said it wasn't possible, like seeing Mario in a PlayStation console. This game that King Zell is hinting towards, it may or may not share a relationship with that one title that Game Informer's Imran Khan mentioned on Kinda Funny Games Daily last month, where, as a reminder, he said, there's a game that's thought to be dead that Nintendo's reviving, and it's not one that people would expect. It was very much a title that was dead and buried, very officially canceled. That was talked about before the February Direct, and Imran Khan was saying maybe they're going to talk about that. He was asked about any predictions for the February Direct. We never got a confirmation that what he was talking about was revealed at the Direct or not. It's still shrouded in mystery. The reason why I bring up this quote to match King Zell's quotes is because he also mentioned this aspect of, hey, there's a game coming for Nintendo Switch that people don't expect. Now, I'm going to separate the two when I talked about this further, just because there are added caveats with Imran Khan's mysterious game, because he's saying that the game that he's talking about was dead. It was officially dead. It was canceled in a very probably public way. How do you make it official? And how can you say that's very officially canceled if it's not public? Whereas King Zell says nothing about the matter. So could they be the same game that they're talking about? Yes. I'm just going to assume they're not for the time being. That Imran Khan is talking about a game that may or may not come out, that was canceled at some point but is being brought back. And King Zell is talking about perhaps a very different game that is just as unexpected, if not even more expected. Because to say something as wild as it's like Mario on a PlayStation console, that's insane. That's insanity. Just think about what would need to happen for Mario to pop up on a PlayStation console. Like Nintendo would have to leave the hardware business potentially before Mario would ever show up on a PlayStation console. So to say that this is as significant as that, whew, I mean, I was excited. So I decided to go check out what the comment sections of the world were saying to get a good idea of what other people thought this was, to kind of localize myself, put some context on myself to say like, oh, okay, like what do other people think this is about? And maybe we could talk about that. And the number one guess that I saw for what this ground earth-shattering game could be was surprisingly Halo the Master Chief Collection. I understand why people would think that this is the game, because this game was just recently announced that it's going to be ported over to the PC, to computers. So it's no longer this exclusive Xbox console game. It's on multiple platforms now. So why not also bring it to the Nintendo Switch? I can follow that train of thought. Also, Microsoft, more so than Sony at least, appears to be friendlier than ever with Nintendo. They are getting really chummy, those two guys, especially with all the rumors that we keep hearing about Microsoft bringing Game Pass to Nintendo Switch and Microsoft bringing games to Nintendo Switch. We heard about Ori and the Blind Forest. We heard about Cuphead potentially coming to Nintendo Switch, all in rumor form, but in not rumor form, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, that game is coming to Nintendo Switch, and that is being developed by a development studio that is owned by Microsoft. I would have never have guessed that game would come to Nintendo Switch, but it is. You know, Minecraft's still a Switch game. I mean, Microsoft is doing their own thing. They are making moves that is having a lot of people question, hey, like, why are you doing this? It seems like you're ruining your exclusivity, and that's why I can totally see why people think that Halo Master Chief Collection, the Master Chief Collection, could come to Nintendo Switch. Now, the reason why I don't think that's probably it is the technical hurdles. That game is really, really challenging to get running correctly. I mean, they had their online problems from the get-go for months and months after that game released on Xbox One. They talked about how difficult the PC port was for so long. I mean, the reason why partially that the PC port took this long to be announced is because of the technical challenges that the Master Chief Collection posed. And if you don't know, the Master Chief Collection has like, I believe Halo 1, 2, 3, and 4, and Reach all in one, with HD collections of the ones that have available for it. So like for Halo 2, you could play the original, and then you could press a button, and then you could get into the HD mode where everything is awesome and shiny, and all the multiplayer games for all of those games. So, I mean, it's a complicated mess. It's not easy to just move over from one console to the next, and it has a lot of online dependencies, and that's why I don't think it's very reasonable to expect a game like that to bring its way onto the Nintendo Switch. But let's take a step back and say, what if it's a smaller scope thing? What if it's not Master Chief Collection, but Halo 2 or Halo 3? An older game that maybe Microsoft isn't necessarily making as much money off of that specific game in the first place that they could bring over onto the Nintendo Switch. It could be the first example of a Halo 2 being playable on a handheld device. That is so significant that I'm sure that it would be purchased by so many people. Like, Microsoft to make a ton of money off of Halo 2 on the Nintendo Switch. It also fits the bill as being very unexpected, seemingly impossible years ago, and as crazy as seeing Mario on a PlayStation console, seeing Master Chief on a Nintendo console, insane. Never thought that would be something that could happen. Fits the bill there. It also gets people excited for the potential rumors coming later. If you play Halo 2 on a Nintendo Switch, you get into that Halo ecosystem, maybe you're more inclined to buy into the Game Pass subscription that could or could not come later on, depending on whether or not the rumors are true. Now let's move off of Halo. What else could it be? I've heard a lot of people talk about Rare Replay, Banjo-Kazooie, that sort of thing. Rare Replay, of course, being a collection of rareware games or rare games coming out for the Xbox One. Rare having a complicated history with Nintendo during the N64 era. Nintendo owned a majority stake in that company, and that company pumped out a lot of instant classics for Nintendo. Banjo-Kazooie, one of my favorite games of all time, is a Rare game, as well as GoldenEye, Diddy Kong Racing, Perfect Dark. I mean, they made a lot of high quality stuff. I always thought it was a big mistake that Nintendo did not full out buy Rare when they had that chance during the GameCube era, when Microsoft was trying to take Rare away from Nintendo, and Nintendo just kind of let it happen. And since then, it seems like Microsoft kind of mismanaged Rare, but that's besides the point, right? There was this Rare Replay, this collection of Rare games that Microsoft released for the Xbox One that could make its way onto Nintendo Switch. That could also be hey, I never thought it would be possible to see these characters again on a Nintendo platform for a lot of them, like Banjo-Kazooie. Seemingly impossible, right? Is it as shocking as seeing Mario on a PlayStation console? Probably not, but it's still a pretty significant deal. And it's also way more likely from a technical standpoint because these are old Rare games. A lot of them should be able to run on the Nintendo Switch, at least more so than the Master Chief Collection. And the only other thing that I saw and or could think about that maybe wasn't from one of the big three that could maybe have that same earth-shattering moment is a Disney property. Because I feel like a lot of Disney gaming properties have been, at least the biggest ones, have been shaken up over these past few years. I'm talking Marvel, I'm talking Star Wars. Marvel gaming has really just been reborn in the past 5 years, and it was pretty crazy to see Spider-Man come exclusive to a PlayStation console, maybe Iron Man, or maybe another big Marvel property coming exclusive to Nintendo's platform. That could be a really big moment that people did not expect to see. Star Wars is another example. Star Wars has had an up and down relationship with Nintendo, but is also one of the biggest entertainment brands ever, if not the biggest, depending on what kind of thing you're talking, what conversation we're talking about at that given moment. I mean, we had games like Rogue Squadron and Pod Racing and all that stuff on Nintendo platforms, but as of recent, especially with the new EA partnership, we haven't gotten anything. So to see Star Wars brought over to Nintendo and maybe being an exclusive title, I can see that being a pretty big moment. But when it's all being said and done, seeing Mario on a PlayStation console is an insanely bold statement. And unless we see something like Master Chief coming to the Nintendo Switch, I would have to say that King Zell is being a little overzealous here in terms of how he's saying this, because like it would have to be something huge. And honestly, if it's not something as big as Master Chief coming to the Nintendo Switch, even if it is Star Wars or Marvel or Rare Replay, I don't think that's big enough. Maybe you could convince me if we talked about it a bit more, but I don't think that is big enough to be saying that this is just like Mario on a PlayStation. I don't think so. It would have to be even bigger. It would have to be something like Halo, right? Right? And that's everything I have for you guys today. If you want to comment on any of the stories that we talked about, or you just want to leave feedback in any way, shape, or form, go to heartcontainerspodcast.com. There is a contact section where you can talk to me about any sort of thing that you want to, or you can reach me personally on my Twitter, where my handle is @RomeFawaz. That's @ROMEFAWAZ. This has been Heart Containers for Monday, March 18th. Thank you so much for joining me, and I can't wait to be back here with you all tomorrow to talk more about Nintendo news.